Hi guys! In today's watercolor tutorial I'm painting Susie from Little Witch Academia. Since the motif is very pastel color-like, as you can see here, I decided to use the Pastel Dreams watercolor palette from Prima Colors. I like with the colors that there is white pigment mixed into the individual colors, so that would fit very well to the motif, but it is not necessary. You can use any watercolor palette that you have at hand. Every watercolor is, when you dilute it with water, available in every pastel tone, so it's just a matter of how you mix them. If you happen to have the palette, you can use it for this motif or for any other pastel motifs. I just find it a little bit easier to mix them, but as I said, you can use every other color palette too. So yeah, this tutorial is definitely based on the hair because she has this beautiful pink hair. I'm starting with filling the face and the hair out with a base tone. For that I'm taking this very light pink here called Lemonade, and when you are using normal colors, you can just use burnt ochre and a little bit of cadmium red, and then you use a lot of water, and then you have this beautiful pastel tone. Here it's a little bit easier because I can just use the pastel color, and then I just go over the complete area here. I just might use a larger brush. I think this is easier. I will just fill it out here. Her skin tone and the hair have a quite similar color. This is why I can just go over the complete area here. Like that. Okay, now I will just add some additional drops of pink in her hair. The color is called Rose, it's just the other pink tone that you see here. And I will just touch the surface here of my paper. And as you can see, the watercolor flows very beautiful on the paper. It distributes amongst the wet area here, and then you have those beautiful flowing effects here. So I just add this rose everywhere on the area of the hair where I can see shadow tones, where you have darker strands of hair. And I'm just adding this pink tone there, here on the top. Also in the shadow areas of the hair, especially where the head meets the hair, we also have a couple of blues. Oh, I forgot to mention. So I enhanced this palette by just ultramarine blue from Schminke, because it is very like light, but there's no dark blue in it, but we need a dark blue for the painting. So we don't need a black, or we don't need very dark brown tones, but we definitely need a blue. So this is just ultramarine from Schminke, and I will use that for some of the shadow areas, but you will see. Okay, I'm just taking more of this rose here, of this pink rose. and just follow along the strands of her hair. Okay, so this can pretty much dry. Maybe I can add here some more strands. So here in the upper area of the hair we have some highlights. So I will try to not paint over this this highlight area here, because I don't want it touched. Here I'm just using the tip of the brush to add some hair strands. So here the paper is still too wet to add any details. I just saw that this area here, her part of the costume, has the same rose tone, so I'm just mixing that too and apply it there. This area just needs to wait anyways, needs to dry anyway, so we need to wait first. I will fill in the rose part here of her costume. Trying to stay in the lines. Okay, also like here in the area of her face, I just have to lift up some of the paint again because it gotten a bit too dark. And here in this area of her face we actually have a highlight, so obviously we don't want to have any dark like spots of color here. I think the pastel dreams colors are a bit easier to lift up, so this is good here in this situation. Okay, let's start with the face then. The basic shadow color of the face here is a rosy tone with a little bit of orange in it, so, or ochre. Since we don't have ochre, I will use this orange color, which is called citrus. I know it's a bit confusing, but if I would have mixed it with normal colors, I would just use ochre, cadmium red light, and a little bit of burnt sienna, and a lot of water. So there we go. Every color palette is capable of mixing this skin tone here. In order to get it with the Pastel Dreams color palette, I'm using also chocolate. This looks kind of burnt sienna to me, and a bit of the crimson, because now it's too orange and this is a bit too much. Okay, now I have a dark tone. Might be a bit too dark, so I will start with maybe a lighter variant. So maybe with the lemonade tone and a bit of my mixed brown tone here. I also use a lot of water because here in the face I will have to be more careful. So this is very dark already, so I will definitely have to use a little bit more water to dilute it and make it a little bit softer. So here I'm just following the shadows of the portrait. So we have a shadow here on the left side of her face. Also, I'm just using a bit more water just to be sure in the case I'm too dark. And I'm following here the shape of the shadow. And the shadow goes until her chin. So I just draw this wet paint to her chin, and then I will have to use a wet brush and smooth out the edge a bit. And here we also have a shadow along her chin and below her chin as well. The strongest shadow is around her eye. For that I will use the crimson paint here. And first I will draw a line where the hair meets her face. This way I can make sure to have a rather clear line and not like a wobbly way of how the face like borders to the hair strands. Again, I just go over the shadows here again to make sure that I have a soft border. Here, like the inside here, I want to have soft too, so I'm just using this wet brush here and lift some of the paint up, so this way we get softer borders here. So I will use a tiny bit of the yellow, of bumblebee yellow, and just add it to the skin tone here, like that. And here again I add some of the yellow. This just gives the skin tone a more natural look to it. And here at her chin too. Okay, I want to add the makeup around her eye. So for that I use the crimson red again. Crimson red. And since the area around her eye is still pretty wet, the paint should like bleed around her eye, which in this case is good because it's eyeshadow and it should blend into the surrounding skin tone. So like that. Okay, the face still doesn't look very appealing, but I hope this will change soon. Fingers crossed here. Okay, so this is the shadow on her nose. And this now has to dry, but I might be able to work on her lips in the meantime. So this again is just crimson red mixed with water. And I just follow the lips, the shape of the lips here, and fill that out. Looks a little bit too wobbly. I might use color pencils. It might be better to just gives me more control. But first it has to dry, so I will use the hairdryer and I will let this thing here dry. Okay, now it has dried, and I will first, before I take my color pencils, I will add some more paint to her, especially to the eye. For that I'm using this brown tone, and blue, so that I have kind of a darker shadow tone here for her lashes. And then I'm trying to add those details here. So like that. And for the eyebrow, I'm using the chocolate brown. And just carefully try to render the form of the eyebrow. So I'm also adding a little bit of the chocolate brown tone around her, around the lash, around the eye, just to indicate the eyeshadow a bit better. Like that. And here, the shadow of her nose. Then for the inside of the eye, the iris looks red to me, red purpley, so I will use a bit of the crimson and the lilac green and fill in the iris. Very careful, of course, because it's such a small detail. The white of the eye obviously is way too white, so we have to correct that too. This has to dry first, so I will proceed with her lips first. Again, I'm using the crimson red and citrus orange, and I will start with the line. Yeah, I need more red here. I'll start with the dark line of her lips, like that. Also here on the left side of her lip, since this is the area that is the shadow portion of the face, the lip as well lies in the shadow. So we have to make the left side of the lip darker. So this looks lovely, I think. Now I can add a little more eyeshadow here to the eye. And for the inside, the white of the eye, I will take the dark shadow that I did, the dark shadow paint that I mixed from the brown and the ultramarine, and just add more water to it. And then I will fill in here the white of the eye, because this is way too white. So like that. And then we need a shadow for her nose. So I will just use a very, very light version of her skin tone. Okay, and now I will continue with the eyebrow. Again, I use the chocolate and the brown tone and the ultramarine blue to have this darker grayish tone here. And I will just add some of the eyebrow hairs there. And with the same color I will intensify the dark line in between the lips. Just a little bit. And I will just go over the lashes again. Just make them a bit darker. And we also need a shadow there on the bridge of her nose. For that I'm using the citrus tone, this orange tone, and a bit of the crimson. And lots of water. And then I'm just adding here the shade of the nose. So I don't want to make a contour around the nose, so I will be rather careful here and just try to add a couple of layers over this shadow area here, but I don't want to start too strong and in the worst case ruin the face if I make a contour around the nose. Most of the time that doesn't look very good. So instead of that, I'm kind of making a like rectangular shape here, where I start here in this area, just draw a diagonal line to her eye, like that, and then I just enhance this area of watercolor and let it blend into the remaining shadow area. So this way I can be a little bit more secure and don't have like the strong shadows around the nose. Especially around noses, it can look very odd very quickly. So you have to be careful there. Still, we need a lighter shadow here on her cheek, a little bit stronger. Okay, maybe here under her eye as well. This looks better. And we also need a shadow under her hair. So I will proceed with the hair, but first I will add a shadow here where the hair touch her face. And maybe I can add a little bit of color to her lip because they look a little bit not dull, but not really saturated either. So I will just add a little bit of the crimson and the rose pink tone here and see if I can make the lips pop a bit more. Okay, and now I would proceed with her hair, and I will start with a different shape of brush. So we need a flat brush for that. So I will try to use this brush here. Maybe it works as I planned. So this is just a cheap brush. An optimal brush would be this one, but this is too large, so I don't have a flat brush at this size. Yeah, let's try it. So I'm starting with the strands of the hair and the like midtones. And for that I'm using the rose tone and a little bit purple, I think. We'll also need blue probably. So like that. And I will, for the hair, I will indicate hair strands. With this kind of brush, it should be a bit easier because you can draw those long lines and they already look like hair strands. I'm starting with this lighter pink tone, obviously, because I want to build my shadows. I don't want to start too dark. Never do that with watercolor. And I will just everywhere where I see hair strands, I will follow the direction and just draw them draw them out. On the next step I would add darker hair strands, but in this step I just need to just lay this base, this midtone base. You can also use a drier version of your paint. When it is a little bit drier, you have a different kind of brush stroke, and you can use that too, just to alternate the texture of your hair strands a bit. So I added a bit of purple to my color here. So this is a bit dark, so I will just have to use the lemonade color again. And now I will try to make the highlight area here, which is a bit tricky. So we have relatively subtle hair strands, and we should be careful to not paint them too dark, just very, very carefully, because we want the highlight to look very soft. So no strong colors here. Again, I'm just using rose and the lilac rain purple and lots of water. And here under her head, just go over the strands that I already laid down, so that it looks like we have a shadow that is cast on the hair. Casted on the hair. And here too. Just lots of water to not make it too dark. So like that. And here so the highlight goes this way approximately. So we have to make this here a little bit darker. carefully go to the edge of the highlight. And also from the other side. And also here on the left side, so the highlight goes, like we have a light strand of hair here, but here it's a bit darker, so I will just use a bit more of the purple tone. And then here we have like a contour, a border of the hair strand, and then it gets darker here on the side. And here it's kind of light like that. Okay, so this is for the beginning. There are still a couple of details in the hair, so I might start with the border of the face, where we have a rather dark shadow here. So for that I'm using the ultramarine blue again to get to a darker color value, and then I use brown, and then not too dark first because I need to be careful here. I will just carefully cut out the face, like I go around the corner of the face, like that. And here on the left side, I just blend the shadow into the hair. And here below her chin, I will change the brush here. I need a bit more control. So below her chin we have shadows as well. And I will just follow the contour of her chin here, so that the face is cut out with the shadow area. It's always important to place shadow areas on top of lighter areas so that you don't lift the shadow areas up accidentally. This way it looks way more like orderly. Okay, and now we proceed to the tricky part of the hair. So I will change to this brush here just to get some more flowy lines, curvy lines. And I will mix a little bit of the ultramarine blue and a bit of the purple, of the lilac rain purple, and a lot of water because I don't want to get it dark. And then I will just look on my reference photo where we have more shadow. So here, like the shadow goes along this line here. I will need a bit more purple, a bit more crimson. It goes along this line here, and then we have a couple of darker strands here and here on the left side, but then I want to fill a larger area, so I'm just using more water, so I can just fill in this larger section of the hair like that. And then here we have a couple of more darker hair strands. And here too. Okay, now we can go to the right side of her head and continue here with the shadows, especially here in the tips of her hair. Everything gets a bit darker, so I'm just using the rose and the crimson color and fill out the tips of the hair. And I'm also blending it here in the remaining hair, just to make it a bit softer looking. So here we have a pretty large chunk that is dark. So for this area I will just fill it out here. And with the tip of this brush I can make pretty fine lines, so this is very practical when you draw hair. And here in this area we also need some larger shadow, so I will just paint over the hair strands to make them a bit more unified and softer looking. And then I add some finer lines that are coming out of this bit of paint, and I'm all the time comparing it to my reference photo so that I have an idea of the color values. For example, this is it's too light here, so I will just go over this area and make it darker. And now we have a little bit more body to the paint because you don't have those strong contrasts between the individual strands. Now we still need a connection, like between the hair and the face, on the right side at least, so I will just add a contour here around the hair. And also the shadow needs to be a bit darker, so it dried and it kind of lost its brilliance again. So I will just use the same color and I just follow this shadow here. It's always good to be accurate on areas like the face or hands or what else, like jewelry or geometric forms. On other areas you can be more loosely, but on the face it helps to be accurate. Okay, now we need a shadow here directly on her head, and for that I will use this ultramarine blue and the lilac green, and I will just draw a couple of lines to indicate this shadow. And then I will use a wet brush and I just follow along this line so that it blends into the pink of the hair. So I'm going to continue with the remaining shadows of the hair portion, and I will still work on the midtones because they are not completely rendered yet. So here we have this larger chunk that is darker. And also the borders of her hair definitely needs to be a bit sharper, a bit more tidy. And I will just continue doing that. And compare my drawing with my reference photo all the time, so that I know when I filled in all the shadows and all the dark strands. This is pretty much a little bit like how diligent and patient you are. Just look at your reference, try to see where you can find darker strands of hair, and then you just render them as appropriately or as best as you can. I'm also adding a couple of variations of color here, like this is more of a blue tone. Here I'm just adding some individual strands in blue to give the motif and the hair a bit of dynamic, make it a bit like more lifelike. So I need more purple here. And the shadow below her head is a bit darker, so I still need to add an additional layer here to make it a bit darker. And with my wet brush I can smooth the border a little bit. So here, where the hair meets her chin, we need a small shadow. For that I'm just using the chocolate brown and a little bit of the greenish brownish colors that I have left on my palette. I'm just adding a small shadow here so that we have a border to the hair. I'm just drawing the shadow here in the hair, just adding some strands. Here too. Okay, now for the larger portions of the hair, I will use the larger brush and rose and lilac green, so the purple and the pink tone, and a tiny bit of the ultramarine blue. And now I look where I can find more shadow. So here at the left side of her hair, it is definitely darker, so we need to add another layer of shadow here. And here it is dark too. The more layers you build, the more three-dimensional and real your figure or your motif will look like. Just a matter of time, and it just takes a lot of layers and a lot of patience, but it is worth it. It's better than just rushing it. Then it doesn't look that good. It's worth it to just look and see where you have to build your layers. So this whole area here needs to be a bit darker, but not purpley dark. We need this rose tone here. So we have a couple of like individual strands here, so I will just add them. Here as well needs to be a bit darker, and here at the bottom too. Okay, so we need a couple of shadows here, and they are a little bit more red, so I will use crimson here. Just add some strands. And of course I follow the direction of the individual hair strands. This is important. Here too needs to be a bit darker. And then here also. And we have some individual strands. Even more realistic, we will have to cut this portion out with the rest of the composition. And with that I mean that we will fill in all the surrounding areas. So for example, her head, and this area here, it's rather dark, so I will use ultramarine blue, a lot of it, a little bit of purple, but mostly ultramarine blue, and a bit of the brown, so that it's not extremely saturated. So let's see. Now we have a huge contrast between the light lines and the light hair strands and the dark shadow of the head portion, which just adds a bit to the realism. Here too we have kind of a gap the hair strands, like that, and here all the dark areas of her costume are on the left side of her figure. So let me mix the paint, just ultramarine blue, and more of the brown and the purple. Okay, here I'm just cutting out the hair that we just painted, and I fill in the shadows here of her costume. Like that. So, and we have like the shadow goes over this thing here. And then it kind of dilutes and blends into the mid-tone. So I will just use water here and dilute the shadow. Then we have here under her the right part of her haircut also shadows. So I'm just placing them here. And here on the left side, it's rather dark too. So I'm just filling this little portion here in too, like that. And maybe a little bit darker here. And here under her head too. So this shadow here just needs to be a bit more finer. Maybe some of it for the lashes too, like that. Just working on the borders here, making them a bit more refined. So, okay, I think I can get some of the color pencils and add some further details. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to refine the edges a bit so that we don't have those super wobbly edges and it looks a little bit more orderly and not so super messy. So this is light purple pink from Polychromos. I will use all the colors from, probably all my colors are from Polychromos. I like them because they are very high pigmented and you can, but they're not too soft, so you can still work on a lot of details, which is great for these smaller kinds of drawings. So now I'm using an ochre tone. And just working on some of the shadows of the hair strands. And I'm just looking where I can find this ochre tone in my composition. Don't want to use too much color pencil, so I'm only really using the smallest amount possible, but still having an impact on the artwork. Okay, now for the shadows. Well, I also need red. Where's my red? So I want to refine her face a bit. So here for the border I just use red and just follow along the border of her face. And then I use the same color and just work on her eyeshadow a tiny bit. Okay, then I use the pink again. Just make the shadow a bit stronger. And for the border here, I use this. This is not Polychromos, this is kind of a watercolor pencil, but I don't use it because it has the watercolor effects. Instead I use it because it is very very hard. It is not too soft, so I don't have a lot of grain on the paper, and I can make like those hard edges here easily, and I don't have a lot of grain like with the polychromos. You can still see the grain. So these water-based pencils seem to be very hard, which is good for drawing. Okay, so I'm just going over the shadow here again a bit, just around her eye. So this purple, just because it's so dark and intense, I can use it in all the darker areas of this painting. So like that. Now for her lashes, this is ultramarine blue. Just refine them a tiny bit. Now to refine the hair, I'm using the Luminance pencils from Carandache, and I will just add some white strands where I just see it fit and where I think it looks good on the hair. So I'm just comparing it with my reference, so I'm not just adding white strands everywhere. I just look on my reference and see, okay, where do I have to correct my drawing. So for example here I just want the blending between the shadow and the highlights a bit better, so I'm adding some of them here. Then here I'm just adding some strands, and here we have a couple of highlighted strands as well, so I will add here some too. And here as well. So that looks already pretty nice in my opinion. So you can, doesn't look perfectly realistic, but it comes close, so I like it. What we could do is maybe add more additional colors and more values to the hair. So maybe some more rose tones. And I'm just looking on my reference to see where to add some darker color values. So when I add those darker color values, it should give the painting a little bit more depth. So I'm just seeing, okay, where, for example, this strand is a little bit too light and it does have some color value variation. So I'm just looking at my reference and I see some darker areas here at the bottom. Not too dark, obviously, just some soft changes. So this maybe was a little bit too brown, so I'm using more of the rose tone here. Here I'm just making it a bit darker. I think it looks not bad. And here the this area is especially difficult because we have the gradient between the darker blue and the lighter pink. This area here needs to be a little bit darker and also a little bit more purple. And here the strands at the bottom can be a bit darker too. And we lost some details here, so I'm just adding some strands again. So I'm going to add a couple more details with the luminance pencil here. And as a final touch, I will use white gouache and add some additional highlights on the hair portion, just to let it stand out a bit and to give it like the extra touch of realism and maybe to correct a couple of things. So I'm using the flat brush for this technique. Just adding some highlights. Can also give some extra texture to the artwork, just makes it a little bit more interesting and painterly. So the white gouache is very helpful if you want to just make some parts of your painting a bit lighter. It's not super opaque, but for the highlights of the hair, it's okay. So that's it for today's tutorial for the hair portion and the face portion, and I will continue working on this painting, fill in the rest of the painting, and I will use gouache, so I will have that in time-lapse because it will take several hours to finish it. But yeah, I will show you the time-lapse version, and hopefully you found it helpful and you could learn something from it. So I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!
you.